Good evening and welcome to a Thursday edition of the Hog Talk podcast presented to you by FanDuel. Live for the Sterling Soap and Roastery Studios, part of the Believe and Buzz Radio Network, where you can hear us each week on 106.7 Buzz 2 in Central Arkansas. All live shows are presented to you by Arkansas Brewing Company in downtown Ozark. I am Porter Hayes. Alongside me, as always, is Adam Hall, and we are joined by Steven Willis, host of Locked On Ole Miss. Steven, really appreciate you for taking time out of your day to talk about this matchup between Ole Miss and Arkansas on Saturday.
Absolutely. I'm going to be completely honest. Whenever the SEC went to 9 games conference-wise, I was praying, and I am praying, that the third permanent rival for Arkansas and Ole Miss are each other. This is a game that needs to happen every year. It's extremely fun. The fan bases love to rib each other. There's a superiority on one side, and the athletes are similar, and the records aren't that far apart. So this is a game that needs to continue, whether or not the SEC makes money on it or not.
Yeah, I think it's one of those games that gets lost, because you hear Texas, you hear LSU, and then when the University of Arkansas brought in the Missouri rivalry and made the trophy and stuff, it really put a kink on things because, the LSU game was always that Thursday or Friday after Thanksgiving. Then you had a lot of the times back when I was a kid, the Ole Miss game was in Little Rock. So it was just as close for people from Oxford to go to the game as it was people in Fayetteville. So I think it's one of those games that's always been there because of the Houston Nut connection and just the proximity to the schools, but it's kind of fallen into the importance because other games have now, come about. But I think with this 9-game schedule, at least if they don't, we know every 2 years or so they're going to be playing each other. But yeah, I agree. 5-5 in the last 10 games. So, this is one of those toss-up series that it always seems to be the last possession or – unlike last year, just a complete blowout. So, but we'll get into that, your thoughts of this game. But just talk about what you're seeing so far out of this Razorback team leading up into this Ole Miss game that you kind of stood out from you were talking about before we started recording, that you've seen things that you think that this team has improved on. What are some of those things you've seen?
I think Taylor Green's a little bit better passer. Now, some of that has to do with the fact that he has 10 touchdown passes and 6 of them are against Alabama A&M, who, as we all know, made Peyton Thorne look like a Unitas candidate a year ago. So that might skew it a little bit. He had 2 picks against Arkansas State. But with Mike Washington at running back, this is where, in my opinion, Arkansas and Bobby Petrino are better, as a better match for each other. To beat Bobby Petrino, you have to stop the running back run, because if you don't, he's a master in the play action game. He can put you on skates. He can tie you in knots, and it all starts with the running back run. It's not the Taylor Green show. He can throw the ball. He can get confidence. He can be a weapon if the running back run happens. What you really want to do with Arkansas, in my opinion, is take away the running back run and put the game in Taylor Green's hands. If you do that, you will be all right. But right now, the way it's situated is Mike Washington, he's a really good back. He's averaging about 11 yards per carry. That is where they have improved, is in the running back and on the offensive line. Taylor Green is the beneficiary of that, not the reason for that, if that makes sense.
What can we expect this weekend from Austin Simmons? He got in some trouble last week, then injured towards the end of the game, took him out. I think he was listed at probable on the latest availability report. Do they expect to protect him a little bit with play calls in his time, or are they just going to go full steam with it?
I think they're going to protect him a little bit. They're going to use Trinidad Chambliss, the backup quarterback. He's a runner. He was at Ferris State, a D2 quarterback. He had 26 touchdowns running the ball. He is a guy that can go sideline to sideline. He was on that last 4-minute drive that Ole Miss scored the touchdown and put the Kentucky game away. I think they're going to try and use him a little bit for the quarterback run, because the weak point, from what I can see, on Arkansas's defense is the defensive line. And if the defensive line is a problem, if you do not try and take advantage of that, you're kind of a fool, because the history in the Southeastern Conference says if that's the weak point, make them hurt. And I think with Kejuan Lacey, I think Trinidad Chambliss is going to do that. But they're also going to do some quick passing game, stuff with Austin Simmons to Harrison Wallace and Deshaun Stribling and Caden Lee. And our old buddy Luke Haas should be debuting for Ole Miss this weekend.
Yeah, perfect timing for that game. And there's been a lot of, chatter between, the Ole Miss fans and Arkansas fans because, the lack of production per se, leading up to this game. But really, when I watched that Arkansas State game for Arkansas, they were really doing really good with, and I brought this point up with Adam, really good with their crossing patterns and really trying to get their slots. To me, it was a 50-50 to me is that a good thing, or was that Talon being Talon and getting comfortable with that one route, that one go route, crossing route, and really wasn't spreading it out, trying to take shots deep to work on that. But what are some attacks you think Ole Miss is ready if they have that short passing game, those crossing patterns? How are they going to attack that?
I think mainly Ole Miss is going to play zone because Talon Green's a rushing threat. They're not going to play man coverage to where the crossing routes are a damaging thing. I think you expect a good bit of zone defense if we're going to be honest about that, just off of what they're playing and with the athletes that Ole Miss has with Sunter and Perkins, with those on the outside. They can spy the quarterback, enough to make that, to speed him up a little bit, make the decision-making hard for him. Now, he's a 4-year starter with his 2 years at Boise State, so you're not going to rattle him or something like that, but it is going to be important to speed him up because if your eyes are on the quarterback and you speed him up, Talon Green has shown that he will throw you the ball. All you have to do at that point is catch it. And if Ole Miss can create some turnovers, which they really haven't done this year at this point. That's something that Pete Golding has always done, made explosive plays on defense, but not many interceptions this year and not a whole lot of sacks either. If that gets turned around, they can roll pretty good. But the crossing routes are going to be a big deal because that's a Bobby Petrino thing. He likes to do that. I do think the zone defense can take that away a little bit and probably force the windows to be a little bit smaller for Talon Green in the game.
With Luke Haas making his debut for the season this coming weekend, do you think that Lane Kiffin has maybe something up his sleeve a little bit to get him more involved just for this being his former team? I always feel like Lane Kiffin has something up his sleeve when it comes to Arkansas. Maybe that's just me, but there's something in it. And right now, I think the perfect storm would be for Luke Haas. But do you foresee any of that?
I think there is something up Lane Kiffin's sleeve for this game, but I do not think it's for the benefit of Luke Haas. But I think he will benefit from it happening. And I think you're going to see a bunch of 12 personnel. If Arkansas truly is struggling on the defensive line, put an extra blocker down there, stress the linebackers and the safeties down, get them running forward and let the wide receivers have a free release to the back end of the defense. If you do that, it can look a little bit like last year's game did. And I think the 12 personnel is a way that you can kind of unlock it. Luke Haas and Daquan Wright, that's a really good matchup problem for the opposing team's defense. So getting them on the field at the same time, especially in the middle of the field, should be pretty interesting because, listen, for the 4 interceptions that Austin Simmons threw against Georgia State and against Kentucky on the road, they were both in the first quarter, and they were both kind of forcing the ball down the field. Whenever he was throwing quick game, whenever he was making quick passes and hitches, he was very good because he has an elitely strong arm. And that gives the wide receiver a step or two to break the tackle of the cornerback trying to close down. I in this game against Arkansas, I genuinely think it's just going to be important for Ole Miss to play clean. No interceptions, no fumbles, no penalties, no weird go for it on 4th downs in your own territory. Make Arkansas drive the ball 80 yards down the field if you can and kick the ball into every possession with a kick. If that happens, I think Ole Miss is going to win the game.
And last year, this game was played in November. Arkansas was coming off a big win against Mississippi State, and then they went on to lose 3 of their next 4 to wrap up the season. Moving to this year, how much of an advantage you think now Ole Miss is kind of tested? They kind of see what kind of team they're having this year with a battle against Kentucky. It's 6:00 at night in Oxford. and you have an Arkansas team coming in who really don't know their identity when it comes to being tested yet. What advantage do you think Ole Miss has coming into this game on Saturday?
I think this Ole Miss team is a lot more tested, obviously, than last year's was. I was dead serious. I've been telling people all week, the 2024 team, as talented as they were, first-round quarterback, first-round defensive lineman, stars all over the place, they'd have lost that game to Kentucky Saturday. I just know it. I watched that game. They would have lost that game. So I do think there was a little bit of resolve and toughness with this younger group of teams, and this is a young Ole Miss team. Make no mistake about that. But I don't know if Arkansas has any sort of mental advantage playing the game in September. I do think they have mental advantage because if you listen to Sam Pittman in his press conference, he wants this game. He definitely thinks that Patrick Kudas did something wrong and leaving it, that it was personal to him. And I think there are players on Arkansas's team that's going to be extremely jacked up to the point where I don't think the game is going to be dirty. That's got horrible connotations. But I do think Francisco Carmona, if he has a chance, is going to give somebody the business in the game. I think it has a chance to be an old-style rivalry football game. Not a brawl, not the Egg Bowl with the nastiness of that is, but just a good, hard-fought football game as long as it's close. I do think that if Ole Miss jumps on Arkansas in the game, there could be, okay, here we go again type situation. And at that point, you can kind of pull away. But if it's a close game resembling 2023, when KJ Jefferson had the ball up 7 in like the fourth quarter or something like that, if the game is like that and Arkansas is ready to go, this is going to be an intense game. It really is.
Yeah. And kind of piggybacking off of that, you're talking about the roster last year. There was talk about, all the money that in this day and age you have to. How much did these people spend on this said roster? And you brought up that that team would have lost that game this first week. What have they done to shake that off? Because there was a lot of chatter of, well, they put all this money into this roster and they just couldn't seem to get it done to get to that point to where they feel like Ole Miss should be one of those teams that's in the college football playoff year in and year out. What difference you think Lane has done of realizing, all right, let's peel it back a little bit and go back to more of a business style opposed to just trying to get all these transfer players and putting this thing together and just making it a puzzle?
I think it's always going to be a puzzle. You may not have a Walter Nolan or a Princely Amon Mielen, but they are going to work in the transfer portal and bring people in. They're going to use that as a heavy recruiting avenue because if we're all honest about it, there's more ready-to-play players, and they're not as expensive as high school 5-stars whenever you're playing that game. So Ole Miss has the advantage because they are playing that. Listen, when you look at 24/7 or Rivals or On3 or whoever, of course they're going to tell you high school recruiting is the way to build a roster. Of course they're going to say that. They have a whole economy built up around that. The worst thing that can happen is if everybody started going transfer portal all the time because there's not enough people to cover it.
Yeah.
But Lane and several others going that way. Florida State's another school that uses the transfer portal pretty consistently. I think that's interesting because Arkansas literally can do the same thing that Ole Miss is doing. They literally could build a roster up the same way. It's a mindset thing. It's deciding that this is something we have to do. There's not a lot of high school players in the state of Arkansas. There's not. There's football or basketball, although it seems like a lot of basketball players come down to Ole Miss. Thank you for Keith Carter. But so it's one of those situations to where Arkansas – if they would just go in on the transfer portal, you don't have to get stars. If you look at Ole Miss's roster this year, they're probably in the middle of the pack in the spend on the transfer portal, but they evaluate it. Deshaun Stribling, he was an 800-yard receiver at Oklahoma State a year ago. They had terrible quarterback play. You got him at a discount because of the team that Oklahoma State had last year. Harrison Wallace, who is a stud, by the way. He's going to be an unbelievable player. He had to deal with Drew Aller at Penn State, so you're able to get him at a discount. You just have to be smart with what you're doing. Set a line and do not go over it. That's the important part. You just put a valuation on it and say, okay, this guy is worth this amount of money, and this is the max that we're going to pay. And if they're not going to do that, we'll go on to the next one that fits that evaluation. That is what Lane has done. And Ole Miss has won 10 games, 3 out of the last 4 years. So when it comes to roster building, he is a mad scientist. That is what he does best, is build rosters. That is what he does best. So we'll see how it happens. Oh, like the rise of Ole Miss and the rise of Lane Kiffin, it was on what he did in the transfer portal, even before the transfer portal, if we're going to be real, because 2020 and 2021, they brought in players from like Canada that played college football that ended up in the NFL. Mm-hmm. They are really good at evaluation and using the transfers.
Is there any one game on Ole Miss's schedule that you would consider a swing game that could make or break their season or spin things out of control?
There's 3 games, honestly. Mm-hmm. There's the difference between making the playoff and going to the Music City Bowl is probably the LSU, South Carolina, and Florida game. All of those are in Oxford. Mm-hmm. So if you can pull it off, I tell people on my show, is like, listen, this is a team that can go to the playoff. But to have that conversation realistically, Ole Miss needs to be 6-0 going to Athens. And to be 6-0 going to Athens, they obviously need to beat Arkansas. Then they need to beat LSU. And they have Tulane and Washington State in between there. There's in this 4-game homestand. But if you're 6-0 going to Georgia, it's time to start firing it up, because 4-2 to close out the season, and you're going to the playoff. You're going to make that. But they have to perform in these games. And with Austin Simmons a little bit nicked up in this game, he is not 100% with what's going on. What are they going to do? Is this going to be a deficiency? If something like that is going to be the question, it's just an unknown at this point. But I like where they are. I like the way they finished out the Kentucky game. I like where they sit at the moment. And I think their defense is really good if they can cut down on the explosive runs. If they can stop that, they're really good. They give up, this is going to be silly, I mean, because Georgia State's nobody, but they gave up like 69-yard passing to Georgia State. And you're like, okay, Georgia State, he's nobody. Well, they played Memphis, threw for 340 yards on Memphis.
Yeah.
Is Memphis that bad in the secondary, or is Ole Miss's secondary better than we thought they could be? That's something that's going to get answered this weekend with Bobby Petrino and the quarterbacks and all of that. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see. As you can tell, I'm actually one of the few people that are actually encouraged by what I saw in Lexington, Kentucky.
Would you agree that, I'll make sure I say this right so it don't sound like I'm comparing Arkansas to Ole Miss, but would you agree that Arkansas and Ole Miss are on the same predicament, but just different levels? Ole Miss is that 10-win team trying to get to that college football playoff level. Here, Arkansas is trying to get out of the bottom. They're in the same predicaments where they got to get over these humps to get to where they want to be in the next level of the hierarchy of the SEC.
Potentially. I tell people all the time on my show is like, we're kicking the door down trying to get in. You've got to beat it down. You need the opportunities to get there. Arkansas is the same way. I mean, it's a situation to where even if they lose to Ole Miss on Saturday, there's still a chance you get Notre Dame.
Yeah.
There really is. And then after that, you're 4-1 after 5 games, and all of the possibilities are out there to where a Florida game, a Florida Bowl game, or something like that comes into focus instead of playing, Texas Tech in the Liberty Bowl. That's probably the step that Arkansas is trying to make. They're trying to get on that Florida rotation, although they changed the bowl system up recently. But you know what I mean by that. Yeah. They want to get to that next tier of bowl games and hope that the SEC doesn't screw them and send them to Texas, the Texas Bowl or something like that.
So you brought up Lane and, working the transfer portal. That's one of his niches. What is he better at, the transfer portal or trolling on social media? Because quite frankly, I'm a fan of Lane Kiffin on social media. So what would you say he does better?
I think he's better in the transfer portal. I do think the thing that he does best is build rosters. And the way he builds rosters the best is by building Frankenstein's monster in the transfer portal. They're not going to talk about it, but it'll be probably the middle of October before they're getting ready to open up the transfer portal window. They will have a list of probably 5 players at each positions or something like that that fits exactly what they want. They play the game exactly how they want. And by the time the window opens and people start getting in, as soon as one of those players enter, Ole Miss is going to be available to strike. And their collective is such, they're not the wealthiest. They're one of the healthiest, but they're not the wealthiest. They put a competitive offer in front of the players and they do what's necessary to win. And they have some boosters that kind of want to go above and beyond. It's not a secret. Arkansas could do the same thing, literally the same thing. I mean, I talked with him, Coach Cal is kind of preventing that a little bit just because of how much money he's making at the moment. But NIL wise, you can do the same thing at Arkansas that you did at Ole Miss. You can do that at Mississippi State. I do think that Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Arkansas is 3 different versions of the same program. And they have relative ceilings. That's one of the reasons those rivalry games are so fun, is because they're so close on the field talent-wise to where wacky and wild stuff can happen because there's good players playing for all the teams.
Yeah, and the same could be said about the LSU game for Arkansas. It's one of those teams where, we've seen history repeat itself. I mean, 30 years back, go back to Darren McFadden, 20 years back, number 2 team in the country, and a 6-5 Arkansas team or whatever beats them. It's just they can always find a way to sneak up win. It's just like, hey, just the past 10, 15 years, they just outside of the 21 season, you got to put 8 or 9 of them together. They've just something always happens, whether it's injuries or schedule or however it may be. But that leads to my question about Sam Pittman. And we all know, the seat's getting hot. I don't know from the Ole Miss perspective or the SEC perspective how hot they think that seat is, but how many wins do you think he needs to win this year to keep his job?
Probably 7. If he gets to 7, he's probably going to be okay.
Is it regular season, or are you counting a bowl game?
Regular season, not counting a bowl game.
Okay.
Yes, 7 and 6 won't get it done.
Yeah.
But 7 and 5, maybe a Duke's Mayo Bowl, if that's an SEC bowl game this year. Sam Pittman gets doused by mayonnaise or something like that. Gives people reason to be excited. I guess, that's the level for the minimum of it. But if it's 6 and 6, I think, I don't know if he can survive that. Yeah. Now the question becomes, who's next? Is it Bobby? Who is next as a head coach if Sam Pittman has to move on to greener pastures?
We talked about a little bit the 9-game SEC season starting next year. Who would you want to be Ole Miss's set 3 year in and year out?
Yeah, I'm pretty cut and dry. I think non-negotiables are Mississippi State and LSU. I mean, that's absolutely the way it has to work. And the third one would be Arkansas. I know that Ole Miss fans are going to be fighting over Vanderbilt and Kentucky, like everybody else in the Southeastern Conference. But you're not going to get Vanderbilt or Kentucky because Vanderbilt is going to end up on Auburn to say, hey, you're playing Alabama and Georgia every year. Here's this, and they'll figure out a way to do Kentucky a similar way to where it's like Tennessee and somebody else on the list. But my 3 would be Mississippi State, LSU, and Arkansas. And I don't know it to be particularly close.
Yeah. I get that. And we talked about that beforehand about, just that being that game where you could see Arkansas just because how close they are. You don't have to say, man, we got Texas every year and LSU, but it would be LSU because I think it would be Texas or Missouri. And then you're looking at Ole Miss. I think you're putting yourself in a spot where, not saying Arkansas thinks they're better than Ole Miss, but you have a chance. Last 10 games, 5-5. It'd be one of them games, it could be a war and you would have a chance to win it. So I don't think they would completely screw Arkansas, but I mean, I realistically think it's either going to be Texas or LSU. and then Missouri, and then Ole Miss. That's where I'm going with it.
The funny part isn't Fayetteville like 3 hours away from Norman, Oklahoma? Y'all actually have a drivable game for a Saturday, and I guarantee you, I get the every other year thing, but you'll hardly ever play Oklahoma. You'll play them the bare minimum that you can play them. That's the way the SEC works.
Yeah, and it's weird, and that's the thing, because back in the Big 8 days, Arkansas was in the Southwest Conference, so everybody's kind of stuck on that. From the fan side, Oklahoma is being close as they've ever been. I don't know how many outside the Orange Bowl have they even played regular season. I don't know how many times they've played, and that's what's crazy to me.
Yeah, other than a bowl game, I think the last regular season matchup was like 1919, back when Oklahoma was in the Southwest Conference.
That's crazy to me.
It is nuts.
Last season, and just kind of backtrack just a touch. Last season, Lane dealt with the death of Monty Kiffin before the season, and then going in through the season and fighting for their chance to get in the playoff. There was all the what ifs and the scenarios, and it didn't happen. Going from all that happened last season into this season, how was his preparation different heading into this season, or was it?
I don't know, okay? But I will give you this anecdote. The best coach game, other than the Georgia game last year, was the Kentucky game. There was a maturity with the way he called that game. He kicked his field goals. He didn't willy-nilly play the slot machine by going forward on random fourth downs. When he went forward, it's because he believed in a play. It wasn't just because it's fourth down and the analytics say go for it. It wasn't that. It was much more by feel. Most possessions ended a kick. They threw the ball one time in the fourth quarter. It was a very mature winning game, and Ole Miss played like a favorite. And that is something I've been saying on my show for a while, that Ole Miss needed to learn how to play like a favorite. Because if you let teams rise up to get you, eventually they will. And last year, Kentucky, LSU, and Florida did just that. So this year, if it continues, we'll have to pay attention whenever Ole Miss has a home game against Arkansas or Tulane, or as it goes. If the maturity of Lane Kiffin in calling the game, instead of sometimes you would see Lane Kiffin games from 5 years ago, and it was like a 9-year-old playing Madden with some of the decisions. It's not that anymore.
Do you think, I don't mean to cut you off, but you think when he come into Ole Miss, he had a chip on his shoulder, to prove that he was, do you think that chip has kind of went away to the fact that he can really kind of, as you said, calm down more, make more decisive decisions instead of just proving everybody wrong, proving that he can win just to prove people wrong?
I think everybody who said that Lane Kiffin's going to be in Oxford for 2 years, every year is like the Lane Kiffin's being quartered by the school and all of that. I think in the beginning, Lane wasn't really looking to move up. And as he developed roots in Oxford, he's kind of settled down at the same rate. And right now, he's at the point where if you told me he was in Oxford another 5 years, I'd believe you.
Yeah.
And there's not a very big overlap in a Venn diagram of places he could even go, because he's making $10 million a year at this point. So I do think there's a maturity in his game. I do think he's happy, or as happy as he can be. He has his brother in town. He has all of the family running around Oxford. Yeah, I think this is a different Lane. He's been able to relax a little bit because honestly, he slowed down his personal life and everything kind of fell into place instead of everything being a chaos thing.
Do you think the transfer portal, I got one more after this, but do you think the transfer portal has kind of made that happen? You don't have to go. I mean, there was a lot of pressure on who's going to be the next Nick Saban. You got to go to Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State. Do you think the fact, look at what Dabo did at Clemson, bringing them up to prominence, Ryan Day at Ohio State, other coaches are going to these schools, and Dan Lanning out in Oregon, making a name for themselves at other schools. They feel like they can go somewhere and make a home for themselves, opposed to just trying to chase to get to that certain level. Do you think that's helped?
I think the playoff expanding from 4 to 12 teams is more important than the transfer portal.
Yeah.
The way it was set before is is there were about 6 teams in the entire country that could recruit to the playoff. It was always Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia, and they recruited that, and they kind of hoarded all the players. The backup second and third string would be 4 and 5 star players. And now there's multiple teams in the playoff. You have 26, 27 teams that can recruit to the playoff. Then you add the transfer portal for kids that just do not want to sit around, and teams that are elite. The days of the elite team, it's over. There's not going to be a 2015 Alabama or a 2021 Georgia Bulldogs anymore. It's not going to happen. And because of that, it's allowed schools like Ole Miss. It's allowed schools like Oregon and these other schools that, like even Texas rose up in this period. Of course, they can just buy whatever they want to, but that's another thing altogether. Yeah. But I think the 12-team playoff is the most important, and that allows the work in the transfer portal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll let you out of here on this. Just you've said your piece on, you have Ole Miss winning the game, but if Arkansas was to pull off the upset, if Arkansas was to win, what would be the biggest key in them doing so?
I think Mike Washington runs for 175 yards. I think between Mike Washington and Kejuan Lacey, whoever wins that battle puts themselves in a position to do it. I do not have Ole Miss covering in this game. In my official prediction, I've got Ole Miss winning 28-21. I don't think it's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to look a whole lot like 2023 did. Mm-hmm. But I think that's very important. If Mike Washington, who's averaging 11 yards per carry, has a big game, that is going to make Taylor Green better. That's going to make Bobby Petrino better. And if they're good, Arkansas has a real threat, and they can hurt you at that point.
Well, Steven, we really appreciate your time, man. Thank you for your insight, and another great game coming up, and hopefully, it comes out on Arkansas's end, but one of those things. But we really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, no problem. You guys have a good day, and safe travels if you're heading down.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Well, that was Steven Willis of Locked on Ole Miss. Again, he brought up good points of just how much that game between the two means. And then, of course, the Arkansas connection with Lane Kiffin and stuff. So looks like it's, there's a lot of people saying it's going to be a battle, but, we'll see. I think this defense of Arkansas will finally get its first test. The offense will finally get its first test. And, we've said all along, the first 2 games to me meant nothing as engaging where this team's going to be. And I was on a interview earlier, and they were asking, what do you think about this team? And I'm like, I can't tell you, because it's easy to go off the success of beating Alabama A&M and Arkansas State, but you truly won't know what this team is until Saturday.
100%. And I mean, you and I have gone back and forth, like with our pick'ems and whatnot. And, we solidified that today on who we were rolling with. And, I picked Ole Miss in this game. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of folks out there that aren't going to like that, or they have Arkansas winning this game. And by all means, like, I totally can see why fans would pick Arkansas to win this game. There's just a lot of there's still a lot of PTSD with this team and this program. And it's one of those, like you and I have talked about, until we're proven wrong in this, and until this team can show everybody that they can, show up and win a game like this on the road, your first SEC game of the season at a ranked team, it's one of those, I can't bet on them. I can't roll with them.
And mine was, and we talked about earlier, just the red flags. You're talking about PTSD. I mean, the red flags we've seen in the Alabama A&M game. Look, this is one of those games you can't afford 2 drives like that. You can't afford to let Ole Miss march down 2 drives in a row. And it turned out to be one of these Georgia situations where you're going in with this momentum, and then all of a sudden the game's over before the fans get in there with the popcorn. You can't let that happen. It's going to be, yes, we do have better running. We have better offensive linemen. We've seen that against Arkansas State, but it's Arkansas State. This is going to be the proving game to where, all right, I'll say this. I mean, if they fight a hard fought battle and show us they've improved and even lose this game, I'm not writing the season off, but you've got a lot to prove. You cannot let this turn into a situation like last year and it be a 30-point game. You cannot do that, because then you know how the season goes. You build up this momentum and then you get blown out, and it's like, because you see the schedule ahead of you. We have next week's game. Memphis game is a win. So it's important, if you want a swing game, this is one of the swing games, because this is what a majority of the people have you losing. These are the type games you need to win if you want to get to that 7-win mark that a lot of people are saying is enough, that the magic number to keep his job.
Man, I think a game like this too, you're on the road, like I said, in your first SEC game against a ranked team. This is a game that I don't feel like you can get down double digits and come back from. I think that you have to keep this close from start to finish. I don't know that Arkansas's defense can do enough damage to stop Ole Miss. Like, I don't want to get into a shootout in this game.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing Arkansas's offense, put up some numbers, but like we've said, look who they've played. It's one of those things that shootouts are uneasy for me, especially with Arkansas's defense. And this is one of those, the defense, I feel like somebody's going to have to step up in this game. We saw Story finally, I say finally, it was only game 2. We saw Xavier Story show up last week. We need that again, because that defense is going to need a leader on the field. If Cam Ball's not getting it in stats, then he needs to be the vocal leader. It's one of those things. The defensive line is going to have to step up. Quincy Rhodes, Cam Ball, these guys are going to have to basically shut up all the people that are talking, if you want to call it negative, if you want to call it speaking the truth, whatever, however you want to take it. But the defense needs to prove a point this game, because this game, you can't let this get into an offensive shootout, because yes, while Austin Simmons struggled, at the same time, we've seen Arkansas defense in the past make suspect quarterbacks look like Heisman contenders, and you cannot do that against a Lane Kiffin team.
The biggest thing in this, you're not going to be perfect. You cannot get into the point to where you feel like you have to score a majority of your drives where you're talking about your offense. Another thing, you talk about the maturity, the defense, the leadership on your defensive side. Everything's cool when you're winning 56-14. Everything's cool when you're up 28-0 at halftime or first quarter or whatnot. What happens when things aren't going right? What happens if you find yourself down 10 points? That's where it's going to be proven if you're a different team. If you can come from behind and win this game, I don't care if it's 7 point. If you can come from behind and Taylor Green can put this team on his back, don't turn the ball over, and you find a way in this game, that is going to be a huge boost moving forward, because you have a Memphis game that by granted on how this talented team is offense, I think you have enough firepower to beat Memphis, and which you should. And then again, you're heading into that Notre Dame game undefeated, and you can have another Texas situation back in 2021. The environment and how this team plays, and I don't care if it is 11 o'clock in the morning. I know there's going to be a lot of people, man, I wish this game was at 6. Play this thing, get hyped up, play, show up, show out, and get the game over with, and then you're heading into a bye week.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is a game, you and I talked about this when we were texting, and I brought up, we talked about this last season, and I still think it holds true with this Arkansas team and this offense. I think in this game especially, I think your offense needs to be on the field first. If you win the toss, take the ball. Don't defer to the second half. We said this some last year, and Arkansas did it a few times. They won the toss and they took the ball and they started off the game right. I think you do that here. I think you get your offense on the field at first, if possible, and strike first. We've seen Arkansas strike first and strike early in these 2 games. Yes, they were against the opponents they were. But this offense, they're capable of it. So I feel like that if Ole Miss wins the toss, let them defer. You take the ball first. If you win the toss, take the ball first. I think Arkansas needs to, whether it's Taylor Green, Mike Washington, whatever, Bobby Petrino needs to have something dialed up to just knock Ole Miss off their rockers in the first possession of the game.
Yeah, you establish the run game. You put together a good 7, 8, 9 play scoring drive. Take 3, 4 minutes off the game. Don't just, I mean, yes, you want to strike quick and all that, but then Ole Miss can do the same thing and then it's even up. You want to punish them. You want to get the run game going, mix it up, get your tight ends involved, get your crossing patterns going, get everything in rhythm, put together a nice drive and score on them. Then you got your defense coming out. They're fired up, ready to go. Hold them to a field goal. Cool. I think that's going to be another thing is not necessarily getting a shoot up, but if you could sustain some of these drives and do a bend, no break, and you're trading out touchdowns for field goals, that puts you in a very, very good spot.
100%. And, it's one of those things that the guys, from last year's team that are looking at their former teammates across the way, and it's don't be dirty about it, don't whatever, but punish the guys in front of you. I mean, he brought up Patrick Kutas. We all know Patrick Kutas finessed Sam Pittman for that extra year of eligibility. Oh, yeah. It's one of those things, with Kutas, has Jalen Braxton, all these guys. I mean, I get why some players transfer. It's in their best interest sometimes. But at the same time, it's like, these guys are the enemy now. Go out and punish them. Go out and punish the guys that aren't them just to prove a point. And I'm not saying take Blue Haz out of the game or whatever, but he's coming off injury. So by all means, shut him down. Take him out of the game. We know I'm not going to necessarily call him his inabilities, because we know that he has all of them in the world, but it's one of those things that he's going to be hobbled a little bit. He's going to be protective over his leg, over his ankle. So it's one of those things, make him uncomfortable. We talk about this in basketball a lot, making the player and whoever you're defending uncomfortable. And I think that this is the same situation. Make Austin Simmons uncomfortable. Make their offensive line uncomfortable. I think that Cam Ball and, Quincy Rose, I think all of them need to look at Patrick Kutas and be like, I'm going to knock you on your ass.
Mm-hmm.
And just take them down, take them out.
Well, and speaking of, odds and everything, the spread just went down to 6.5. Ole Miss is now presented by FanDuel. Arkansas is now just a 6.5 point underdog. The over under is still at 62.5. So they're looking at a high scoring game in the 30s. So, I would lean more. If I was to bet either or, I would bet on the over under. I'm not going to get into the spread. Not with this game. It's always close. It's always a tight game. It's hard for me to say this is going to be just a touch. If you want to go over 6.5, 7-point game, I just can't. And that's the biggest thing with betting on this one. But yeah, presented by FanDuel, the odds right now 6.5. It's down from 8.5 to start out the week. So it is moving in Arkansas's direction.
I think this is going to be one that we've talked about before. This is either going to be a 3 to 7 point game, or this is going to be a blowout in Ole Miss's favor.
Yeah. And we'll wrap things up with our pick'em contest. What week are we in? 3, 4, 3? Week 3. Adam, I'll let you go first with your picks. Again, looks like I told you not to listen to me after I think I drug you down last week because of. The Bears let us down, and who else was it that it was OU.
Ravens.
It was Michigan. Yeah, Ravens. So
let's not
go ahead with your lineup and your decision outside of the Arkansas Ole Miss game. We kind of talked about that, but start off with Tennessee and work your way down on your decisions.
I honestly, the Georgia-Tennessee game was a toss-up, and with this one, I just rolled with Georgia over the fact of Kirby Smart and the team overall. Tennessee came out with 73 points or something last week against East Tennessee, I think it was. I still don't know who Tennessee is. Yes, Joey Aguilar is apparent that he is more than ready for it. I just think Georgia's the better team here. It's one of those things with Notre Dame and A&M. I just have to trust Notre Dame in this. And at the same time, too, if Arkansas is to win this weekend, if Arkansas is to win next week against Memphis, I want Notre Dame and Arkansas to both be undefeated because Notre Dame lost their first game. I don't want Notre Dame to have a second loss before they head into Fayetteville.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this one rolling with Notre Dame. South Carolina, again, I think that Lenore Sellers is ahead of everybody in the SEC at quarterback. Nothing against Diego Pava in his 18th year or whatever he's in now. But it's one of those things. You're still Vanderbilt. I know y'all upset Alabama last year, but this is a new season. I'm rolling with South Carolina here. Green Bay, Washington. I had Washington picked at first in this. I switched gears here, and some of that had to do with Green Bay's performance against Detroit. I know that Detroit isn't the same team since they let their offensive coordinator go. It's one of those things that I'm just rolling with Green Bay right now. I feel like they're hotter. I mean, I know it's only game 2 for them. I'm just rolling with Green Bay at home on this. The next one, I can't go for Atlanta in this. I wanted to pick the Falcons just to have another possible game to help swing the record back in my favor a little bit. I don't fully trust J.J. McCarthy. At the same time, he proved a lot as that game progressed on Monday. So I think it was Monday night, or maybe that was Sunday night. No, that was Monday nights. So there, I'm rolling with the Minnesota there. I don't know that I've ever picked a Houston Texans team to win a game, whether it's been this pick 'em or betting otherwise.
Ugh.
I don't trust them. I'm rolling with Baker here, and I don't say that very often. So maybe Baker will be faster than he was against Fayetteville Police Department.
We'll
see.
Dixon
And then
Street.
I'm never going to pick a Las Vegas Raiders team. It's one of those things that they'll find some way to lose, even at home. I like what Harbaugh's doing with the Chargers. I mean, he's kind of making a Baltimore-esque offense and slightly defense. So it's one of those that I'm rolling with the Chargers here. I think that this is the year that the Chargers are going to make a little bit more noise.
Yeah. And on my side, look, I think this is going to be one of the most important weeks we've seen in a while. This early in the season, we're talking about proving ground. That's what I'm calling this week, proving ground, because even Arkansas Ole Miss, Arkansas is proving that they're back. They're looking to get on the winning track. They're looking to win a game that they're not supposed to win. Ole Miss, like Steven said, getting to that point where they get a position to really make the college football playoff. But in the Tennessee, Georgia, again, Tennessee's got to, realize, look, we've got a chance to beat a team like Georgia at home. Game day's there, but I'm with the Dogs until it's like you said, until proven otherwise. I have Kirby winning this game. Notre Dame, A&M, it seems like A&M's one of them teams that'll get the hype, and then it's like they get kind of sluggish. Notre Dame, I think they had to shake off some early rust, but this game right here, and then, looking ahead to the Arkansas game, you do not want them to have those losses. I'm with you on that. I more so is I want them to have the least amount of losses as possible coming into this game. South Carolina, Vandy, look, they're good, but you got a good South Carolina's got an underrated defense, and you've got a guy in Pavia that is coming in to try to upscale Sellers. I think Sellers is a better quarterback. And I think he's going to take notice to that, and they're going to win. And you know how bad I hate to say South Carolina is going to win at anything, but for my pick 'em. But Washington, Jaden Daniels, he's proving that he is going to become one of the top quarterbacks in the league eventually. And then we've seen what McCarthy did last week. Baker against Texans, and the Raiders are just they're that. I don't know. There'll be probably 3-5 win teams in the NFL. So it's really half and half when it comes to, you're looking at 2 close games right there in Minnesota, Atlanta, Green Bay, and Washington. You drop down, and I see 2 blowouts. I just see Tampa Bay and the Chargers running away with that game. But that's our week 3 picks. Presented to you by FanDuel. Again, you can check all odds, and you never know. If you want to get it at 6.5 today, it might change to 5.5 tomorrow with the line for the Arkansas Ole Miss game. But head on over to FanDuel, set up your account today, and get in on the picks. But anything else to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think I'm good.
Good. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight. We want to thank Steven for hopping on. We're going to be going into these Thursday shows where we're going to have people on from the other team to come on and discuss it. So really excited about that. We'll get insight from the other teams. We'll look at a Memphis, see who we can get from Memphis next week, and then going forth. But for everybody, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for this presented to you by FanDuel, and we will catch you on Sunday. And don't forget, 6:05 Hog Talk, 8:05 Hog HQ. We'll see you Sunday.